I'd also like to thank DNA for supporting this particular event. Thanks a lot to them. I'll begin quickly by introducing our moderator, Rupleena Bose, who claims to have achieved moderate success at her lifelong ambition to do everything all at once. But when she's not attempting this multi-purpose task, she is teaching at Delhi University, and she's written a lot of academic titles and scripts for award-winning films. So Rupleena is going to steer us through this, and then we're also going to have question and answers. So thanks to all of you again for coming. Thank you for the song As Yet Unsung, and over to you.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. Hello, good morning. It's very early in the morning, but it's a fantastic panel that we have. I welcome Vamsee Juluri, Irrfan Khan, Dr. Meghnad Desai, to this discussion of our favorite topic, Indian cinema. In India, I think cinema is the nation and the nation is cinema. And historically, nation building and cinema has been very deeply connected. I'd start with Irrfan, who has recently essayed two fantastic roles, which is Pawan Singh Tomar, an outcast of nationalism, and Kissa, which is a hero a very unlikely hero, and Kissa is also set during partition. So I'd like to ask Irrfan, what makes a hero a hero?
I think the definition of hero should, and it should keep changing from time to time. Today, the way I see hero is a person who challenges himself, who stretches his own limits, who challenges his own limits, and who fights with himself.
Fantastic. Lord Desai, you have written about Dilip Kumar, and you talk about Dilip Kumar as the first Nehruvian socialist hero. I mean, how do we then see the progression of the hero?
You know, in Indian cinema, we sort of part of the national narrative. At least in Hindi cinema. I don't know about any other cinema. Let's just talk about Indian cinema always is part of the national narrative. It tells the nation's story to itself. And it merges into the Mahabharata and Ramayana and all those sorts of other things. So what really happens is that the hero changes and reflects the changes in the country. So for earlier things that Dilip Kumar did, sort of before independence, were rather weak, weeping, Rona-Dhona type heroes. You know, Zamana was against them and Sansar was about to destroy them, and they already died. And then in the 50s, they became bold. They suddenly said, you know, we can shape our own future. And so Dilip Kumar in Nayado is very different from Dilip Kumar in Mela. You know, he's challenging the machine, he's going to win. And then in Ganga Jamuna, he's on the wrong side of the law, but he's wrong side of the law because the vote is unjust, and the leader and so on. And then you get the whole Amitabh Bachchan phenomenon. And now there's a variety of different hero types going on. And what's very important, just one more thing. In an epic like Mahabharata, you may choose your own hero. You may make Karna a hero, who is not a hero, because you think, well, he is a wrong person. Right. You know, or Eklavya can be a hero. You don't necessarily have to make Arjun the hero. So I think there's a lot of chance for having heroes who explore different parts of our psyche, different parts of the national narrative. And that's why I think Bollywood is endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Vamsee, you write this beautiful thing about your mother, Jamuna, being the people's actress, and you say how fans separated you from your mother. So, and we move on to the heroine. So then what does it mean?
Yeah, it's interesting. My understanding of the power of Indian cinema embodied itself in a peculiar and somewhat traumatic form. So as a child, I was often torn away from my mother by walls of fans when she was a very big star in Telugu and Tamil in those days. So even at a very young age, I understood that this cultural pastime had so much power in India, and later when my mother went into politics, a natural fallout of her being called Prajanati or people's actress, I understood that cinema, politics, and what this has called the national narrative, they're so entwined in our country, because the irony is that when I was a child, my parents totally discouraged me from having anything to do with cinema. You know, they said it would spoil my studies, my eyesight, and maybe they were being kind because they knew that I was never going to be hero material. But the irony, of course, is that now I teach cinema for a living at USF, and so it's really through the eyes of my American students I've come to appreciate cinema all over again.
Right. Irfan, Pan Singh Tomar, I mean, it's something which is a fascinating portrayal, and of course you have been portraying characters which otherwise we would have never met, and we meet them through you, your characterization and your acting. So tell us about Pan Singh Tomar.
What do you want to know about Pan Singh?
The character, because he is on the other side of nationalism. He's neglected by nation.
See, the interesting thing about Pan Singh Tomar, what happened with this film, because these are changing times in Indian cinema, and the audience is maturing and the filmmakers are maturing. And there are certain films which signifies what's happening in the country. And Pan Singh Tomar became that kind of film.
Right.
Nobody expected this film to do well, even, nobody had that kind of belief. It wasn't released in that kind of, with that kind of confidence.
Right.
But it was the audience who embraced the film. And suddenly it became the voice of, inner voice of angst of our country, which is demanding certain changes, demanding a concern from the system. And for me, Pan Singh was like a complaint. It's a poetic complaint to the system. And suddenly audience, embraced it, and it became the voice of everybody.
Yeah.
So for me, it signifies the changing times in society and also in cinema.
Right.
Sometimes what happens, cinema doesn't really reflect the social conditions.
Right.
Cinema tries to give you a kind of sleeping pill that you take this, chill, and forget everything. You don't need to reflect. But because it's not just a circus, cinema is also creative art. It's also, it involves money. So there's a lot of combinations in cinema. So even to reflect what's happening around us, the cinema has the potential. It's your choice. You want to do it or you don't want to do it. Certain filmmakers doesn't want to talk about what's happening. They just want to. They believe in status quo. They want to give a good time to audience, and they don't want anything else. So it's the potential of cinema. If you want to exploit it, you can exploit it. If you don't want to exploit it, it's your choice.
Right. I think that
Sometimes the cinema reflects what's happening around you, or sometimes it doesn't. And most of the time in our country, cinema hasn't been in that state where it's really reflecting what's happening in the society.
My view is that, yes, cinema is like a sleeping pill. It's kind of a, sort of like Valium, it releases all the tensions, to relax, But occasionally things happen and people kind of, people certainly reflect it. And I find very interesting about the Dabang type of hero. Basically elections are going on, and Narendra Modi offers a Dabang type of hero. He'll go and kick somebody. If something happens, his solution, he'll go there and kick somebody. Now, I think there is, on the one hand, the hunger for Dabang type of leadership, which Indira Gandhi was Dabang type leadership. She put everybody inside and, got her way. And originally we thought we were a nice, gentle nation and we looked after everybody. And people are sort of saying, no, we kind of prefer certain simplicities. A Dabang type of is a simplicity. It is like a Valium. He says, problems there are, I'll come and kick you. I'll come and do this, I'll eliminate corruption, I'll do this. And to me, it reflects a kind of hunger that they want a decisive, quick solutions hero. Like Charles Bronson used to do in Hollywood, You've got to go and take revenge, and things like that. Now, something is wrong with the society. We don't believe in reasoned solutions. We don't think we can sit down and talk to each other and work out a solution which is consensual. We keep losing our patience. So we shall see what happens. It's an interesting development. I don't know which of the politics is going to be turned out. But it's interesting.
Yeah.
But I think there is cinema which could entertain you, engage you, and also makes you reflect about certain things. That kind of cinema, I think, India needs.
Yeah.
India needs a multi-dimensional kind of cinema where, on the surface, it's entertaining the mass, but also it gives you something more than just, one-dimensional time pass kind of film.
Yeah.
There could be a film which is on the surface, it's a rags to riches story, but there are so many things if you want to contemplate, if you want to reflect, there's so much material beneath it.
Right,
So
absolutely.
that's what I think we need.
Yeah. And if you look at the 70s also, I mean, with the anger against the establishment, and we saw the rise of the angry young man. What happened to the angry young man?
He became Arvind Kejriwal. That's the angry young man. He is an angry young man. And he goes around door to door, knocks on the door and says, "Aapki shikayat kya hai?" But he also had the same idea. He solved everything in 12 hours, They want to, but that's fine. It's a kind of part of he's become part of the system. The angry young man has become part of the system.
But I think somewhere cinema is also responsible of giving this kind of hope that things could be resolved.
Exactly. Much too easily.
It's like fast food,
Yeah, fast, exactly.
Vamsee?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, one of the things we could probably be doing more is having conversations like this, since I'm a teacher at heart. One of the things I wish we would do is, have more conversations even in schools about cinema, because it's not only the parallel movies, but I think even mainstream Bollywood, if we were able to talk about it intelligently with school children and go beyond the normal terms of conversation, then I think we'll be able to get them more interested, in things like history. For example, The Angry Young Man and in Amitabh Bachchan in the 70s, and Mojave's morphed into something real today. So I think the classroom is really the place where cinema belongs.
Yeah. But two things, if I may say, the commercial pressures now are such that a kind of film Irfan would like to see can be made, but they won't make the 100 crores on the first week. In the 50s, you had filmmakers like Bimal Roy or even V.R. Chopra,
Absolutely,
who made films which had content and which were box office. Bimal Roy always used to do that. Somehow he managed to bridge the thing, bridge the gap. And I think later on, the economics became such that you just could not afford to take any risks. So parallel cinema became parallel and went there. And you certainly had the commercial cinema. Now I think things are coming back. Now people are again saying, okay, I don't want 100 crores, $50 crore millega to bahut hai, I'll meet the cost of my film. And for briefly, I was attached to some film company board of directors, and I was saying, listen, make small budget films because the percentage profit is higher. Then on a big budget film, the percentage profit is very small. Don't look at revenue, look at profits. But they all want a big budget, sort of lots and lots of money spent, big stars. And people all that want, and those films don't always work.
But I think it's a media which creates a pressure. If your film doesn't do 100 crore, aap jo hai neech jaat ke hain. There's a kind of complex which comes inside a filmmaker. He thinks if my film is not doing 100 crore, that means I'm some lesser species. But when we say that the good films can't make 100 crore films, I think we are underestimating our audience.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of potential. Nobody knew that Kahani would do such a huge business.
Absolutely.
On an international level, Slumdog Millionaire was, here it didn't do that much of business, but the cost of the film was 15 crores. It made 3,000 crores in international market.
Wow.
So for that film was watched everywhere all over the world as a rags to riches story. But there was something more to it. It was not just rags to riches story. The Life of Pi, it's a very complicated film. It doesn't confirm the film language. It doesn't give you the solution. It just leaves you with your own self. It doesn't give you any solution. And to put that kind of money by the studio in that kind of film where it's not giving the audience any solution, that's a kind of creative risk which you take. That's the conviction of the director.
Right.
You know, and the most interesting thing about filmmaking and being in this business is you can reflect on yourself, you can reflect on society, and you can, you know, make a story out of it, and you can engage people and earn money and you know, engage people and talk to people, you know.
And change lives also.
Change lives.
I want to ask Vamsee a question through you.
Yeah.
You know, it's a very strange phenomenon that Hindi film stars don't become political leaders. But Telugu and Tamil film stars, you know, become chief ministers.
Yeah.
You know, and there's something about the hold cinema has on South Indian population, which is completely unlike Hindi film.
Hindi film stars.
I don't know whether it is
Godlike quality which they acquire.
they, you know, anti Ramara or anti Ramchandran, you know, they are sort of, literally they're icons, you know, they're icons.
Yeah. Vamsee.
Yeah, well, okay, I guess I'm qualified to answer the question. Yeah, so yes, it is a remarkably South Indian phenomenon that, you know, I think the degree of charisma that MGR and NTR and others have achieved in South India and translated it into politics is something we haven't quite seen elsewhere in the country, maybe in California, but even that doesn't compare. You know, Arnold Schwarzenegger was Terminator, but he wasn't God. So, yeah, N.T. Rama Rao, I think the mythological career had a lot to do with it. And you know, he was Rama, he was Krishna in movies like Maya Bazaar, which are such a deep part of you know, the Telugu mind and heart today. But having said that, you know, I don't think it was just a question of fooling people with his godlike roles. You know, it's true that NTR was worshipped, you know, as if he was a deity, but I don't think people were fooled by him in any simple sense, because he did represent, you know, the aspirations of the people. And there was a very interesting moment, I think, in the 1980s, a little bit of an anecdote again about NTR and then also my mother's involvement in politics. So after NTR became the chief minister, my mother joined politics as well, and you know, she was somehow expected to be able to counter him because she has a credibility. So there was a very popular movie in Telugu called Sri Krishna Tulabaram, you know, which was you know, kind of the Shyamantaka gem story and all that. And anyway, so when NTR was worshipped as Krishna, then my mother joined politics, and then she was identified as Satyabhama. So if anybody could, you know, fight Krishna, and there's a scene in that movie where Satyabhama kind of kicks the crown of Krishna's head, you know. So there was a big, you know, woman's goddess angle there and so on. But having said that, I think there has been a change from what I observed even in Andhra Pradesh. Even though we do have film stars in politics today as well, it seemed to me a lot more organic and grassroots in the 1980s when NTR and my mother were fighting it out and the papers were having a field day with their cartoons. I think what has happened today, at least in the Telugu film industry, is, again, like some of the issues we were talking about earlier, there has been such a monopoly of, you know, commercial interests, which are also deeply familial, you know, the 3 or 4 clans essentially, which run that industry, that we see very little innovation. And so you have this very tight nexus between movie making, fan clubs, politics, and various other interests. Right. So in a way, I think the glory days of NTR as Krishna being a voice of the people has passed as well.
Right.
But I think,
Are you going to run? Huh? Are you going to run for?
no, sir. Never. I think these are not good signs when cinema people, you know, film stars are considered God, or you know, I think we should break this myth that they are special. They are just as special as what they are doing, you know.
As their characters.
As their characters, or what connection they are having with the audience.
Right.
Most of the stardom is all about making the audience feel lesser than themselves. And you know, that's a very strange thing, that I keep on doing films and I keep on telling you, see, I am a superhuman being and you are the lesser people. Please love me and shower me love and buy my tickets, and you know, I'll keep giving you 2.5 hours, which will put you into sleep.
Right.
So I think people should be, they should get more educated about these species called film actors.
Film stars.
But can I say this, all the films of Irfan I have seen, there's never been the simplicity which a 1950s film had about the hero.
Absolutely.
The hero was always completely 100% perfect, pure. And so when Dilip Kumar acted in Amar as a rapist, people just didn't want it. People said, no, Dilip Kumar can't do this. And they just, the music was good, it was Mehboob and Nimmi and Madhubala, Dilip Kumar, it flopped. Why? Because people, today we can make more nuanced characters.
Right.
We're not fully pure, we are more cynical, we are more kind of balanced. And of course films get made which are sort of simple romances. But audiences now old enough to understand that, everybody has something wrong somewhere. And that is, to overcome that, as Irfan said, to overcome your own shortcoming, that is heroism.
That is
and I think they're beginning to get something like that. That you have to overcome your problems, and it's like Shah Rukh Khan in Chak De India. It's obvious he was going to win, but anyway he had sort of fallen and he was trying to recover, and that was a very unusual character for him to play.
Yeah.
How we shy away from challenging the system. I'll give you an example. Sholay is a great film. You watch it, you enjoy it. Great action and characters, the way lines are written, the simple lines, but you will remember all your life. But even there, Amitabh Bachchan cannot marry a vidwa.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely.
That's right.
So the commercial cinema certainly confirms
To the
all the values which doesn't exist in the society.
Yeah.
Like, love for your mother, brother, or sister, or everything which doesn't exist. Cinema keeps on confirming and saying that no, it exists, and be assured they exist, and nishinto type.
In a way, cinema, which means what you're saying is like it's creating the values and not encouraging people to challenge.
Exactly.
And test
Just
and
confirming that what is there in your head, the values which you think they exist.
Yeah, it's like the large happy family stories.
Right.
Which,
Again, I wasn't in India when Sholay was released. By the time I saw it, I was not as impressed as everybody else was impressed because I had seen too many westerns like that already. But when I think about it, one of the interesting films in 50s was Ek Hi Rasta, which B.R. Chopra made.
Right.
It is about widow remarriage. It was about a young widow and things like that. Now, that created a sensation, commercially successful. 20 years later you come to Sholay and this man can't marry his Beva. And it's not understandable why he can't, he can run away with her or something. But in Sholay, Sippy adopted those constraints.
right.
And they played no role in, okay, it saved him from having Amitabh Bachchan sing a song with Jaya Bachchan or something like that. But I don't think there was any logic to it in my mind.
You also write about Pakiza, which you call a classic. I think it's a good time, and the Muslim social, of course, are very important. What about something like Pakiza? How will that be set?
I have this theory that there are Lucknow of Pakiza or sort of other films like that.
Umrao Jan.
Umrao Jan and actually doesn't exist. It exists in the Muslim imagination.
Right.
They're the perfect thing, perfect tahzeeb, the beautiful women dancing and entertaining.
Poetry.
And nawabs and all that. And it's a very precious dream because it embodies a certain cultural height that at the North Indian Muslim communities they achieved at some stage. And it's so precious that you wouldn't get away with making a film which trashed that Lucknow. You couldn't say, oh, that was not really perfect at all. It's full of terrible people. Why? Because it's now, and it's like our picture of Mughal kings has become so idealized that Akbar can't do any wrong. Akbar is Akbar sort of thing, And so we have created this sort of things for ourselves. They're very carefully preserved. And it will be very shocking, and might even lead to, to FIRs if you started saying, oh, it wasn't like that at all. I kind of wanted to, I don't think anybody's going to give me money, but I want to sort of remake Pakiza and say that this woman had a fantasy about somebody falling in love with her feet. There's no chance it is going to happen. There's no chance a respectable man was going to fall in love with her and marry her. But she has to live through a fantasy to make her life tolerable. So if anybody has got about 35 crores to lose, I'll make a remake of Pakistan and we'll have a great time. But
Will you retain the songs or you'll create new songs?
I will only retain the songs. No, the songs are fantastic. Songs are what makes a film. Those songs are absolutely precious. And Ghulam Mohammed is the hero of that. In my book, I have a long chapter on songs and lyrics.
Right.
The lyrics are fantastic. Kaifi Azmi, Mazhar Sultanpuri, really writing superb lyrics. And I think that is what makes Pakistan such a great film.
In fact, lyrics, we can also talk about the progressive writers movement. Like Bombay cinema had the best screenwriters in the 50s. We had Chuktai, we had Bedi, and how did that change also?
And again, there was idealism at that time. It's very difficult for this generation to understand what communism meant, because people like Kaifi Azmi, Mazhar Sultanpuri, they all used to live in the same community, in same large flat,
right,
sharing cooking and things like that. You look at
Manto also before that.
These were memoirs of the time, Chetananand. They were all dedicated to the revolution. Exactly. And they just thought that art was the way to doing it. Mazhar Sultanpuri went to jail. Nobody knows that he actually went to jail. But Mazhar Sultanpuri, all his life was dedicated to the cause of the revolution. He wrote fantastic songs. Or Sahil Lujani, who is much better known. But these were actually poets writing film lyrics.
Yeah.
India is the few countries where, apart from Cats, T.S. Eliot didn't write songs for any other film. But here are top-class poets writing film songs. Of course, writing film songs is how they can then afford to write poetry, because poetry doesn't sell. But films have made possible some of the most beautiful, sort of poems that popularly are known. People know film songs and sing them. If someone like me who didn't quite understand Urdu, I could sing word perfect those songs. Because, it is sort of poetry, it's fantastic poetry. And Indian cinema affords that. I'm sure it's the same true of, South Indian cinema.
Can you imagine writing a lyric for a cabaret song? Aage bhi jane na tu, piche bhi jane.
That's a fantastic.
That's a cabaret song. And I think that was the best period of our film industry, and we are still trying to catch up to that period, and I wish we could bring that. I think that was a time where everybody was hopeful, and there was a kind of spirit.
Also very large
nation building, and every department was thinking, the sky's the limit and we'll reach there. And so the filmmaking has that kind of complexity and simplicity and profoundness.
Probably because the nation also had more hope at that time.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think in the 1940s and 50s, again in the Telugu industry, you see that kind of fine coming together of aesthetics, progressive concerns, and again, traditional idioms like mythologicals. The movies with NTR in the 1950s, again like Maya Bazaar or any of those movies, they're very different from the way mythologicals are being produced today on TV, for example, where it's all like fashion model shoots with some stunts thrown in. And there was a lot of emphasis on the lyrics. They were all drawn from traditional theater forms in South India. The language was beautiful. And again, the sentiments, I think the sentiments today have been largely reduced to this kind of cliched idea of, loving everybody and, as you had mentioned earlier. But I think there was a time when a kind of ethics was being talked about within the characters that each movie was about. And again, one of the interesting anecdotes I thought I should share is, so my mother actually was introduced to cinema in the late 40s, early 50s by members of IPTA, by Dr. Garikpat Rajarao.
Yeah.
And so she used to do all these plays in the streets of Guntur when she was about 13 or 14 years old. And so all those songs were very, very hardcore progressive. And then she went into these mythological films in the 50s, I think, which were still wonderful. And then by the 70s or so, you know, everything became commercial and devoid of that kind of meaning.
And then socially also, when we read about it, they were socially much closer together. They used to help each other out, you know. I mean, they were not actually some rivals. I mean, the Pakija, for example, a lot of Pakija was finished when Naushad did the music, because Ghulam Muhammad had gone. You know, even when Ghulam Muhammad was living, I gave an example, when they first started recording, he had just had a heart attack. So he was sitting there, and so he says to Lata Mangeshkar, "Beti, mujhe chilwana mat. Don't make me shout." And so Lata Mangeshkar said, "Aap agar chillaenge, to ghar jaiye, Naushad sab thik kar denge." So Naushad was there, you know, just for a song recording. He was there just present because Ghulam Muhammad had a heart attack. And she said, "Go away, this man will be your assistant and he will look after it and we'll manage ourselves." It was this sort of very kind of guerrilla atmosphere, you know. And they used to help each other, go in and out of each other's houses, offer stories. I mean, there is with the Naya Daur story, you know, which was Rajendra Singh Bedi. And apparently Mehboob went to B.R. Chopra's place and said, "Wo tange wale ki story mat karna, barbad ho jayega." You know, things like that. So you really had a lot of camaraderie at that time, and they'd all grown up together.
In fact, talking about the 50s, we've also seen a fair silence about the partition. And, you know, in fact, it's a good time to talk about Kissa, which is an unlikely hero in that sense.
Yeah, he's again a person who's trying to test his own limits and trying to challenge God. So in that process, he becomes an anti-hero.
Right.
But the story is about, you know, how he makes you reflect about certain, you know, follies or certain your shortcomings.
Right. And there has been a silence about partition. I mean, there are not too many films on partition when we talk about the nation, right?
I think it's too deep a wound to talk about. You know, especially North. In South India, there is no wound because it doesn't happen there. But in the North, even from Bombay, you move to Delhi, and partition is a much bigger phenomenon.
Right.
And in the 50s, they made, you know, there was a film called Nastic, which was a big hit, which was about partition. And even in Raj Kapoor's first film, Aag, the woman Nargis is coming from Pakistan.
There are also a few Bengali films.
And so there are bits and pieces, but I think, you know, it's the whole thing. It's such a deep hurt in the nation. The nation is set up only as a result of partition, only along with partition.
Right.
So you're kind of born with a birth defect. It's sort of like that. You don't want to talk about the birth defect. And even now there is a subterranean politics between, say, BJP and Congress, all about partition. You know, and we somehow say, don't talk about it. Let's just get on with it. You know, let's maintain the peace that we have, and we will occasionally think about it, but ab jaane do.
You can only watch tragedies which are not your own part, you know, it's, which is not immediate to you. If you are going through certain trauma, you won't like to see the same subject film on the same subject. You can't bear that. Because I remember when I was going through certain things, I watched those kind of films. It used to put me, you know, into despair. So when something is little far away from you, it's easier for you to, you know, have a sense of drama and bear it.
You know, as I point out, Dilip Kumar only played one Muslim character in his life. That was Salim.
Right.
He never ever played a Muslim character. Now, it's one of those things.
And he was an Indian hero in that
I don't think being a Muslim hero would have been a box office hit somehow, you know, or nobody tried that. But he never, you know, Rajendra Kumar played in Mere Mehboob, but Dilip Kumar would not have played a role like that. I don't know why, but he was very, very particular about things like that. And I sort of asked him, he didn't give me he said, no, I played what roles came along, and in those days people only, you know, and all his names are like Shankar and Mohan and Ram and things like that. Very simple names, very kind of basic heart of India heroes. And that's what he is. And throughout his life, he has that sort of persona built up.
But it does signify, sir, I think maybe those times where they had to change names, because the partition happened
Yeah.
and because of,
From
your
Yusuf,
Muslim identity.
Absolutely.
Most of the actors changed their name.
Indeed.
Trying to
Veena
create a
Kumari and
national
Naraka-
sort of figure, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting how, again, the representation of Hindu-Muslim relations in Bollywood, I have had a chance to see it playing out in, again, the context of the US classroom. And one of the reasons I got really interested in talking about Indian cinema in my classroom was just after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. My students were asking all these questions. I was teaching a class on media violence at the time, and they were watching a certain news channel which believes in war and the American way and things like that. So they would ask me these questions like, are we really facing a clash of civilizations? Is Islam doomed to clash with all the other religions? So, and strangely enough, it was a movie that had just come out a couple of years before, and that was Mission Kashmir, which proved very, very useful for us to watch in the classroom and get into discussions. Because, at one level, yes, it's fun, and there's, these songs and fights and everything. But when I saw my students getting into the characters and how they had to make these moral choices about what vision of religion they wanted to follow. There was a bit of jingoism, no doubt. But on the whole, I think the story in that movie came closer to a deeper inner Indian vision of forgiveness and reconciliation than we've seen in politics. So as absurd and fantastic as it sounds, I like to say that Bollywood has kept Gandhi alive more than our political institutions. So if you don't believe me, please read my book.
But is it also another thing, Dilip Kumar, he was actually offered 3 names. One of them was Jahangir. But he said Kumar because Ashok Kumar was so big. He said, I'll take Dilip Kumar. But today, if you wanted to be a Bollywood hero, whatever your name, you should attach Khan to your name because that is the only way to get to the top, So maybe I shall become a Khan and then try to capture a Bollywood film.
In fact, that's the other thing about cinema and morality. I mean, are we trying to create a moral nation through cinema? Is that something which cinema has also been doing in some ways?
Again, as Irfan said, in things of morality, you could only offer simple, palatable things to the audience. You're not going to challenge the basic assumptions. Or very few filmmakers really challenge the basic assumptions of, of the people. Because it is, you only have 2.5 hours to do this. And you would need to do something very, very imaginative. So I think films just feed our morality, most of them. And that's why people go for a good time.
Yeah.
People don't go to get upset. But if you get people upset, you might make more contribution than.
Yeah, I think there's, at one level there is this calculation, I'm sure from the interests of the producers about what is acceptable morality and how much limits can be pushed. And the more the money, presumably, the more cautious you're going to be. But having said that, I think again, at least if you take a few important movies, again, movies which sometimes we feel like laughing about, like Hum Aapke Hai Kaun, beneath all the things you could critique about that movie, there was something to be said. When I did an audience research project on it many years ago, I went in there thinking I was going to find proof of oppression and all the silly ways people were interpreting that movie. But I learned to respect the audience because what people said about that movie essentially was that even though we were living in this age of consumerism and selfishness and gratification, all the characters in this movie were looking out for each other. They were being selfless. They were prepared to sacrifice and so on. So yes, it is somewhat simplistic, but at the same time, again, compared to everything else that's going on in the media environment with advertising, and again, living in the US, perhaps I have an element of nostalgia for our movies in that sense. I think there are some positive moral elements to that we can interpret from our movies.
When Bimal Roy made Sujata,
Yeah.
late 50s, a lot of people thought that he had taken the easy way out because here was really a story about an untouchable girl being adopted and being sort of treated as a junior servant kind of family. And then it all ends very happily. And some of us progressive young people are very upset that he had kind of offered a, again, sort of a palliative to us. Okay, it's all right. She marries a handsome man and the world is fine. And we thought, why can't we do something tougher? That ultimately when push comes to shove, this man cannot marry this woman, whatever. He didn't do that. And it's one of those choices made. But that having said, that film caused more for the cause of reform in a kind of heartland of India, where people still found the whole idea of an untouchable woman marrying a Brahmin boy shocking. I mean, even today you'd probably get the cup and chai beating you up if you did. So progress happens slowly. But again, a filmmaker makes a compromise.
Also the moral dilemma of the character, which was something which I think people of the time related to. And also in Bandhani, I have been told that it's time for question answers. I'm sure audience has lots of questions, especially for Irfan. So we'll take the question answers.
Oh, wow.
Mike.
This question is for you, Vamsee. I also live in the United States, and I have lived there for 30 years, and obviously it's not, it's automatically I compare Hollywood to Bollywood. And I see that there are very few actors like Irfan and Amir Khan and Nasiruddin Shah and some actresses who do immerse themselves in the roles. But I still find that some of the big names of the commercial movies, they just are playing themselves in every single movie. They are not able to transcend their own identities. And I'm wondering, is it because the directors are not taking a hold of the situation and saying, this is what we want you to be? And is it the actors who are calling the shots? Therefore, we are just in sort of a status quo position where every single film, these actors are themselves with different names.
Yeah, I'll answer briefly, and then I think I should hand the floor to Irfan to tell you more about that. But Jerry Pinto once wrote that actors play other people and stars play themselves. And again, I've seen that from up close. And it's a fairly scorching thing to be in the family of a star, and that too from that generation. And my father sometimes jokes and says that when my mother shouts at him about making a mess on the desk or something, she's acting out a combination of a goddess from one movie and a zamindarni from another movie. So we see all her movies in real life. What the actor can do as an agent of culture, as somebody who wants to express himself or herself, I think because my mom was done with most of her career by the time I grew up, so I kind of see the aftermath of it in the close domestic context. But I'm definitely very curious about a generational change in acting too, especially for someone like Irfan who's acted in really beautiful, serious films which my students see and admire as well. So I'm actually curious whether there's been a generational change in how actors manage their professional life.
I think it's two-way. One, sometimes films are made not like films, they are made like project. One actor is here, so there's a guarantee of 100 crore investment, and then there's a director, then you don't have a story. You have the actor. So the actor will say, I need to have 3 fight scenes, here, there. 3 songs, 5 songs, So if the story, now whatever story fits in, fit the story. Yeah.
After 5 songs.
And that film does 3 times of its investment. So it's the audience which is going and watching, and maybe they're not liking, still they're going and watching in numbers. So because they're watching in numbers, that cycle goes on. Once the actor, it becomes a need for an actor to be part of the story, to serve the story, then people will be pushed, actor will be pushed to do something more than just play themselves. So we have a kind of cinema which is trying to tell stories. There is a cinema, there is no story, it's just entertainment. Come, watch some action sequences, watch some songs, and see me.
Exactly.
So, and people love it. And you see the kind of, in our country, people have no choice, there's no entertainment for them. When I go in, when I go in small villages, small cities, I can see people, but they have no choice. They just want to go to the theater and have some good time. And we have those kind of people in numbers. But the other thing is, in our country, only 3% of people watch films. If we can make some interesting films, and if we can bring in the audience which is not interested in cinema, you can see, what kind of possibility we have for good cinema.
And which is, having said that, times are also changing. We have audience who are accepting very different kind of films because they are getting made, I guess, today. Of course, these independent films are often not available easily. I mean, we won't have like 18 shows like a mainstream film, but it's always there, like Lunchbox is an example. All your films actually are examples. Next, yeah.
Yes, in your 5 to 6 session, you said that that's the film industry needs to evolve. That's the Hindi film industry. But I have a different opinion. I say the audience needs to evolve, because had the audience been so evolved, or had the audience not been so, or had been so evolved, people wouldn't go out to watch Salman Khan movies, which are primarily focused on defying the laws of physics and laws of motion in the action sequence. So, who's to blame? Is it the audience or the film industry who has to evolve?
See, what we do, because of this immediate consumerist culture, we look answers in single sentences or single dimensional. It's interdependent.
Yeah.
It can't be one. You can't have one solution. It is interdependent. If the audience will demand films, the film industry had to make good films. And if they are making good films, audience will have choice. So it's an atmosphere. It's not you can't say audience is responsible or filmmakers are responsible. It's a give and take.
See, I just want to say one more thing. See, Devanand only acted Devanand all his life. So this is not new. All the roles of Devanand are Devanand. And that's what his audience wanted to see. So he had a dedicated sort of following. They wanted to see Devanand.
Even Al Pacino, he doesn't.
Yeah.
He just be himself, but the way he explores that character, that's something different.
So the stories are something else. The stories are reflective. I mean, they're incorporating the star and the character, I think, together in the single story.
Because the character is just a part of the story.
Right.
It's serving the story. It's not that story is something else. You watch me, story is secondary.
Yeah. Okay. Somebody at the back. Yeah.
Irfan, my question to you. Do you really think movies in Indian context, can be a source to bring about social change? Or is it just entertainment, and entertainment? You do the business, you entertain, we pay to you, and full stop. We don't expect anything apart from this. Why do we go ahead and think that movies should bring about the social change in India? Do you agree with this?
See, movie has filmmaking has a possibility of bringing in the change, adding to the atmosphere. But on its own, it cannot bring change. It cannot change the society. It can add to the prevailing atmosphere. But if, film can also just entertain. So it has all the possibility. What do you say, sir?
Yeah, social change happens in a variety of ways. There's to be a sort of groundswell of political movement, the ideological debate and so on. Films have the very different character that they reach out wider and deeper in the audience than any author, any politician, nothing like that. So, one film, as I was saying before, a film like Sujata, which the progressive literate people said, oh, there's a compromise there. Out there in the heartland of India, it did create a lot of social change. How could this woman marry this,
Of course.
and the fact that it was thought to be normal that this woman could marry this Brahmin boy surprised many people. It's still, as I was saying, it's still a shocking idea in many parts of India. So social change happens in films, toss their little bit into it, but a film by itself cannot cause social change. That is too much to expect. Just as a book by itself cannot cause social change. A person, a leader by himself cannot cause social change.
Two quick movie examples from the Telugu film history. I don't know about social change, but the same progressive message, one worked, one didn't. My mother's debut film was called Puttilu, The House You're Born In, made in 1952, I guess 60 years ago, almost to the year. It was made by Dr. Garikpat Rajarao, again a progressive filmmaker. Story of a young woman who was made to drop out of college, marry somebody who turns out to be a drunk and just a bad sort. So at the end of the movie, she walks out on him, finishes her studies, becomes a nurse, and becomes economically independent. And this was my mother's first movie. It flopped. And because audiences were really, really upset that a woman wouldn't go back to her husband in the end. A few years after that, there was a very popular Telugu movie called Gundamakada with NTR and Savitri and my mother and Nageshwar Rao. And that there's a very charming song which NTR sings called Lechindi Mahila Lokam, that the woman's world has woken up. So I don't know whether that has caused social change, but every time I hear, men, even of our generation, younger people singing that song, I like to think that here was a song, a lyric from a movie, which is telling somebody to respect the fact that women are taking over in a good way.
And films have the possibility to entertain and educate and also mislead. If it's done wrong, it can mislead you. That's why, we have so many films by certain nations which are propaganda film, which is about their, what they think about certain community and things like that.
One more thing. The Aam Aadmi Party is singing a song which we'd all forgotten. Insaan ka insaan se ho bhaichara, yahi paigam hamara. That is from a film called Paigam, which Vasan made with Dilip Kumar and Vajantimala. And I can sing the whole song, but I won't, thank God. But here is a 60-year-old song which certainly becomes the theme song of a new political party.
And I think stories can change in people, internally in ways that you cannot even articulate or understand sometimes. It's so subtle or it's so intimate. Next, okay.
Hi, Irfan, my question is to you. So, Life of Pi, how difficult is it to bring a character out of a book alive, because people have a lot of expectations that the character in the book is like this. For example, I have a preconceived notion that your character is like this. So how difficult was it to enact somebody's, like people had thought of your character as like, they had preconceived it. How was it you had brought it alive?
In these circumstances, you try to be in line with the director, what he wants from your character. So you sometimes, you don't go by the what people have in their mind about this character. You align with the director, and then, you create your character.
I think last question you want to ask?
Something about a film like 1984 by George Orwell, futuristic political film.
But I saw the film. I'm old enough to have seen the film. As a film, it was terrible. I saw the film. It was a very dull film. It's a great book. Great book. I read the book. But, we probably disagree about it. But the first 90...
I haven't seen it,
He's too young.
The book was better.
I will see.
It was almost a Hollywood B film, I remember. And I saw it when it came out. And I'm trying to remember the name of the man who starred in it, Edmund something. But it was a very minor film.
We have
Great book, but minor film.
very little time. Questions? Very quick, please question, very quick. Yeah.
मुझे इससे जो डाइवर्सिटी है हमारी इंडस्ट्री की कि हर तरह की फिल्में बन रही हैं, दूसरी तरह की फिल्में भी को भी उतनी ही ऑडियंस मिलने लग जाए, 5 करोड़ की फिल्म अगर 50 करोड़ कमाने लग जाए तो आई थिंक दैट्स वुड बी अ वेरी गुड साइन. और ये चेंज आ रहा है एंड एवरी वीक फिल्म इंडस्ट्री इज चेंजिंग फॉर बेटर. So I think we'll have newer stories and newer generation which will which will try and create our own language.
Right.
And I'm very hopeful about it.
And filmmaking is getting cheaper. The
It's cheaper,
technology
right.
itself.
Technology is
Technology
changing,
itself,
yeah.
you can make films, with a very cheap technology.
We have all the technology, we don't have storytellers. We need storytellers.
Chalo.
My question is, sure.
I'm sorry, can we just...
Step in here and say that we need to respect the person with the mic, and that will be the last question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My question is to Irfan. I want you to talk about a movie which you did around 10 or 11 years back called Hasil.
Ji.
It wasn't much of a commercial success back then, but later on it developed a sort of a cult status, and mainly because of the character that you played, which was a negative character. I mean, the character that you played, Ran Vijay Singh, that was a hero among the friends, but later on it developed to a negative character. How do you feel about that?
See, that was a time when we were trying to say that we are going to redefine entertainment. That was our motto. That was our drive. And that's what we did at that time. But that time, we didn't have too many multiplexes, so we didn't have alternate audience. That time it was single theater audience was existing. So it was just a time, if that film would have come today, would have done something else. But the success of the film is that people still remember that film as if they've seen it yesterday.
Yes.
So that's the power of film, that's the strength of the film.
A warm thank you to all
Go
of
on
you.
forever, but thank you so much for this
Thank you.
delightful session.
Thank you,
Irfan.
Lord Meghnad Desai,
Thank you.
Irfan Khan, and to Rupleena. Thank you for steering this.